Thanks for listening to the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. You can contact the show at twitter.com/DW Groovecast and through Facebook at facebook.com/Drummers Weekly Groovecast.
Good evening.
I am warning you right now, if you touch my drums, I will stab you in the neck with a knife.
Ain't a bucket. Ain't a bucket. Mom!
Take it easy. Lower it.
I'm not gonna lower it. I have to do this now.
I don't mind you playing it, but lower it.
Everything get straightened out?
No, we had a problem. I mean, we tried to do everything we could.
What do you mean?
Well, you know what I mean.
Next!
Little trouble there. You're rushing.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah!
John, don't you love it?
Play ball!
Oh, come on, man.
Sorry, man. I'm excited.
I told you that I was potentially going to the Braves game tonight, and now you usurp my joy.
Well, I just can't be happier that a bunch of Southerners are rolling in their misery that it's baseball season and not college football season.
Well, let me temper that disappointment by saying the Braves are on pace to go 162-0.
Yeah, that's good.
Hey, son, 8 unanswered runs.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
But they won't get 8 runs for the next 4 weeks.
My expectations have been put to the point that if we can just stay at 500 this year, I'm going to be happy.
That'll be pretty good.
I wonder if our guest today is already bored out of his damn mind. Because we don't know.
We're just pushing a bunch of listeners' buttons who hate sports right now. If you're wondering,
well, it's one of those things also that we never know whenever we have a guest on the show if they're a sports maniac or if they're just totally indifferent. Because it seems like with musicians, there's no middle ground.
That's
you know
true.
what I mean? It seems like and Chris, if you're not already aware, he and I are sports maniacs. So
hey man, I'm a season ticket holder down in Tuscaloosa.
Right.
He's already got one of our questions answered, which we're not even going to.
I've already insulted him. This is going to be awesome.
Well, for our listeners, let us welcome to the show the fantastic drummer for the Zac Brown Band, Mr. Chris Fryar. Chris, welcome to the show, buddy.
Howdy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, it's our pleasure, man. We're just delighted to have you on the show. I know that our listeners will be glad to hear you. And so, again, thanks for being on the show, man. We, like I said, we appreciate you joining us via Skype. And we got all the technical bugs and all that good stuff worked out, man. So we're ready to make this thing happen.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, great, man. Well, look, first thing, let's just ask a couple of brief questions about when you first started playing, and then we're going to get into the good stuff. So we know that you are an Alabama and a Birmingham native.
Yeah.
How old were you when you picked up sticks, and who was the first person that you studied with?
That's a very good question. So the first time I picked up sticks would have been, I was about almost 12 years old, and I joined the junior high band, and I actually wanted to be a baseball player, and I broke my leg, spent an entire summer laid up on the couch, and I couldn't do anything but practice drums via a pair of sticks and a pillow laid across my lap. And it was somebody's way of saying, hey, I got something better, or, different, at least, in store for you. So that's what I did. I played drums on a pillow for a whole summer, and then discovered I really had a knack for it. And so that was about the age of 12. And then I didn't really study with anybody in particular. I'm basically self-taught. Even though I did go to, I learned how to read music. I did go to University of North Texas or North Texas State, whichever one it's going by. I get so confused by all that. And then I went to the Mississippi University for Women for a little while. And while I did study like mallets and snare drum and timpani and things like that, at MUW I was a piano major for the most part. And when it comes to drum set, I'm pretty much self-taught. I just, I know how to read. I get a book, open it up, try to get as much information out of it as possible. But, I always wanted, when I was at North Texas, I wanted to study with Soph. And as of today, which is, well, it's the end of March. Here in a few days, I'm actually going to go and visit Mr. Soph and get a lesson from him. So it's like 30 years later, but whatever.
Wow. That's tremendous. Well, let me tell you, you will not be disappointed because I am one of Ed's students.
He might be.
Yeah. No, man, I didn't go to North Texas, but I have studied with Ed, and he is one of the true masters of our instrument, man, and one of the greatest communicators that you will ever meet.
Yeah, he's a fascinating individual, and his brush technique that's what I want to get is the brush technique and just a kick in the right direction. Over the years, I'll hit these little plateaus where nothing seems to be moving forward in a direction that I want. And so I'll try to find something to inspire me. I finally managed to convince Mr. Soph into taking me on for an afternoon. I think it was just a scheduling thing for the last, year or so that we've been loosely in touch. So it worked out.
That's awesome. And I have to interrupt this interview by saying that I read a little bit of your bio on your website, and I thought it was a joke when it said that you went to the Mississippi University of Women.
No.
That's a real thing, man.
It's a real place. It's in Columbus, Mississippi. It's the oldest women's university in the country. That's straight up is no lie. I mean, I was so I left North Texas. I was only there for about a year, and my grades weren't great, and it just wasn't my vibe. The place is wonderful and it's magical, and there's a lot to be learned there. But it just vibe-wise, it wasn't for me. So I'd take a year off. Well, actually, just a semester off, and I ended up getting a phone call from a buddy who says, "Hey, my brother is a professor at this college in Mississippi. Do you want to go back to school? Because he needs a drummer." I said, "Yeah, sure." And I go and visit. It's an all-girls school. I'm thinking, hey, why not? And that was it, It's like, but they didn't have a drum department. So I had to be either a voice major or a piano major. And piano technically is a percussion instrument, so I'll do that. And I'm terrible at playing piano, by the way.
I think it's interesting that you have that story about North Texas, whereas most drummers, when they talk about the school that they went to, like especially North Texas or Berkeley, it's like some fantastically amazing success story. And then you just said, it wasn't quite for me. One of the things I think that sometimes gets lost is that, in particular, when students go to schools like that, you are thrown into a department where all of a sudden there's 250 percussion majors, and and you think, you go like, oh man, I'm going to go study with Ed Soph, and then you realize when you get there, I'm on a list with these other 250 people, and for the first 3 years, you're studying with a graduate assistant. Is that kind of what happened to you? Did you study with graduate assistants when you were there, or?
So at the time, it's a long time ago. I don't know how it is today, but at the time, they had this sort of progression of events. So you would take snare drum your first semester and mallets. And then, so they were really big. So it was like snare drum and mallets were the extreme concentration. And then you would move on. I believe my second semester was, I can't remember. I seem to recall that I was studying much of the same. It was just mallets. They're feeding me mallets and more snare drum. I got to study with Ron Fink for one semester. He was amazing. I loved hanging out with that guy. But yeah, it was all graduate graduate students, which, you know, they were all knowledgeable cats. I mean, my mallet teacher, David Gluck, was one of Gordon Stout's marimba prodigies. You know, the guy was just amazingly gifted at playing a marimba. It was his bag, you know. But yeah, that whole like getting thrust into a bigger situation than you're capable of handling is definitely applicable to me. I mean, I grew up in a really small town where, through no fault of my own, I developed a really overinflated sense of ego because I was always winning all the awards and going to all state and all county, and then I get to North Texas and everybody's way, way better than I am, way better, just by leaps and bounds, and it was very intimidating. I was, that part didn't hurt my feelings at all. I was just like, wow, I want to, this is awesome. I love this environment. Everybody here is better than me. And I looked at it as an opportunity to learn. And it just was so competitive that at the time, it was not my vibe. And it doesn't mean that, like I said, it's a wonderful place. And I learned a lot there. And I got to see some amazing players and hang out with some amazing people. But it was just so overwhelming, just the huge difference that it is.
Out of curiosity, was Keith Carlock or any other drummers of that have kind of gone on to make a name for themselves, were they there?
Yeah, so trying to think. Keith and I were freshmen the same year. And I remember seeing Keith play. It was in the lobby of one of the dorms, and he and a few other guys had just set up a jam session. And it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. He was 18 at the time and crushing it. I mean, just murdering this drum set in the most beautiful way. And I'm such a drum geek that I even remember not only what the drum set was, but the entire setup. I remember everything about it. That's what a geek I am. But he was killing, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, this guy is going to have a very long and illustrious career. And I've been a fan of his ever since then, and just, loosely following his career and paying attention and, trying to see him play when I can. He's a monster player. He was then. I'm trying to think who else was there. Let's see. David. Let's see. I think Jason Sutter was there at the same time that I was. So Mark Ford, who is, I believe he's the department head at North Texas now. He was there. He was a graduate student. He was a grad student at the time. But there are a lot of names that I see around, and I'll recognize the name and go, oh, wow. Like, that dude was at North Texas when I was there for that short period of time. So, yeah, there were a lot of really great players there. And it was beautiful. I loved being around all those great players.
It certainly puts it in perspective, man. Like, you recognize those names from a year of being there. It's like, you look at the whole of that school. It's mind-blowing how many people have come out of there.
Oh, yeah. And then, there's a lot of really astonishing players who, for whatever reason, never made that leap into touring or recording. They, what they wanted to do was settle down and be more of a teacher. Mm-hmm. There was a kid on my in my dorm, like just a few doors down from my room, a guy named Norman Bergeron, and he teaches. I think it's at Temple University, and he's just a monster player. Always has been, but he never, I never saw him take that leap into the touring the way some of the other guys did. And I know that he's a professor, and like I said, monster player.
Some people just have that passion.
You won't necessarily hear of. You won't see him in the magazines or anything like that. But there's a bunch of monster players that come out of there. Incredible guys.
Chris, how did you feel about the actual classwork of a music major? Things like history, theory, ear training, that sort of thing.
I enjoyed it. I really liked it. At MUW, I was really having to learn music as opposed to just learning about drums. And it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I was actually learning how to hear, what a 3-6-2-5-1 sounds like. I learned all about 16th century harmony, which I'm still terrible at. The whole voicing thing, the 4-part voicings, I'm terrible at that still, but I enjoyed learning it. The music history, if you have a context as to where something's coming from, you can better understand it. So, I was taking a Western Civ class at the same time I was taking music history. And it was like the classes were just mirroring each other the whole way, in terms of the timeline. And I enjoyed it. Some people, maybe they are so into playing drums that they don't take the time to enjoy the other classes. But I really dug it. I really, really enjoyed it a lot.
One of the things also that I think is invaluable about studying at any type of music school are the ensembles. And one of the things that I impress upon any student that I send to school, I always say, listen, one of the things that you need to really take advantage of are playing in as many different ensembles. It doesn't matter if it's classical music, doesn't matter if it's big band, doesn't matter if it's small group. You need to play in those because you need to get some practical playing experience, because you need to learn as you go along instead of necessarily learning and blowing it on a gig. But I wanted to ask you, did you enjoy playing in different ensembles? Anything stick out in particular?
So the interesting thing about that is at North Texas, you had like 100 different ensembles. At the Mississippi University for Women, there was one. That was it. Yeah. But at the time that I was there at MUW, I had a full-time gig playing. It was a house gig in Birmingham. So I would drive back and forth every night to Birmingham to play the gig. And that was just as invaluable as experience-wise, because the way this particular gig ran was it was in a restaurant. They wanted cocktail music, your basic country club cocktail hour, for the first hour of the gig. And then they wanted it like light rock and like easy listening. And then the last like hour of the gig, they wanted to like really bust out with like dance music and rock and roll. And so I had to learn a lot of music, and I had to learn it quickly. And every day, the band leader would walk up and go, "Hey, we're going to learn this." And this was before the days of streaming. So, I had to like throw a cassette tape that he would hand me a cassette tape, and I would throw it in my tape player. That's how old I am. We'd throw it in the tape player, and I'd like make a little dummy chart and listen to it and make sure I had it. And then, try to go, do it the best I could. It was really, I learned a lot of music that way.
I think we all did, man. The little, I like what you called them, dummy charts. Man, in my studio downstairs, I've probably got a stack about 6 inches high of dummy charts, as you say.
I have over 500 in my iPad.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just because you keep them for gigs.
The coolest thing about technology is that, you can bring an iPad to work on a gig, and there's all your charts, and they're easily organized. You just like put in the first 3 or 4 letters of the name of the song, and it pulls up in your little search engine. It's really great. And, but yeah, the 5x7 index card was like my best friend. I kept those on hand always, because you never knew when you'd have to write something out.
Yeah. Chris, when you finished up at Mississippi, did you end up getting your degree there?
Actually, I was fired from music school.
Is it a scandalous harassment case?
Yeah. Right. So while I was there, I had this professor who calls me into his office. His name was Dr. Richard Montalto, and Doc calls me into his office, and he sits back and is got a cup of coffee. And so, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I'm doing it. I'm playing full time, and I'm in school. I'm doing good grades, doing good work. And he said, I think you should quit school, and I think you should go out on the road, and I think that's what you should do. And I thought I was losing I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, seriously? I should quit? And I'm doing so well. And he goes, well, I think this is much more valuable to you to quit, go out on the road. He goes, there's things you're going to learn on the stage that you wouldn't learn in a classroom or in a book. And you need that right now. And so I left. I never finished my degree there. And it's not the kind of thing that a professor normally would encourage, a student to do. And years later, like fast forward a long time down the road, he just happened to be flipping through the channels on his TV, and he comes, oh, it's the Grammy Awards, and who's that? Oh, it's Leon Russell. Who's the Zac Brown guy? And then he sees me behind the drum kit, and he's like, oh, wow, that's one of my students. And he called me. He watched the program, and he saw us win Best New Artist, and he calls me. We were backstage. I was hugging Smokey Robinson, and which was that's like a surreal kind of thing to be able to experience and say. But my phone starts ringing, and it's the doc, and he's like, hey, man, just wanted to say congratulations. I'm proud of you. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. Here's the guy who encouraged me to take the big leap, and to spread my wings, so to speak. And he was one of the first people to call me and congratulate me. And it's like a full circle kind of story, and really, really cool, to
Good
me.
stuff, man. I love that.
That is a great story, man. That's a tremendous story. So this guy basically did you a favor by kicking you out of school, so to speak.
Yeah, even though he won't admit it now, he told me at the time, he said, what are you going to do if I decide to stay? He said, oh, I'll just flunk you. I was like, wow, okay, so I'm out. And he goes, oh yeah, you're out. You got to go do this.
So, Chris, now we just go forward into professional life, and most people have a kind of this day of reckoning whenever they finish school, and they got to figure out not only what they're going to do, but where they're going to live. And most musicians will go as far as where they're going to live to one of three major choices, right? We know where this is going. It's like, well, I can go to L.A., I can go to Nashville, or I can go to New York. But right. What was your thought process, and where did you end up?
Okay, so I wound up in Birmingham. The logic was twofold. Number one, I was working full time with a band already, and while I was never in any danger of being able to buy a Rolls Royce, I was making a good living for a freelance musician in Birmingham, of all places. If you can make a living in Birmingham, Alabama as a freelance musician, you can survive anywhere, because the amount of hustle that it takes to stay busy and keep a full calendar in Birmingham it's a daunting task. And but I was already working full time. I had a band leader who was he was doing the hustle for everybody in the band. And then I also thought, if I go to LA or Nashville or New York, then it's going to be like North Texas all over again. And insofar as that, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be just a little tiny fish in a great big old ocean. And I didn't want that for myself. It wasn't about the ego as much as it was, I just wanted to work. And it was more about having opportunity to play. And I thought, well, I can go to, I can drive to Nashville. It's only 3 hours away. So if somebody wants to hire me in Nashville, I can do that from Birmingham. And I got to looking at how centrally located Birmingham is, and I wanted to freelance. And so, within 5 hours drive, you can cover a lot of ground. I mean, I've got New Orleans and Memphis and almost all of Mississippi, most of Tennessee within a 5 hour drive, almost all of Georgia, if not all of it, and part of the Florida Panhandle. So looking at it from that perspective, I could cover a lot of ground, and did for a long time, and I have a different way of defining success than most people. So You know, I think that was the paramount thing, was that I was looking at it from a totally different perspective. I wasn't looking at it in the terms of like being on the magazines and in the magazines and being interviewed, and having a tour bus and a drum tech, and I wasn't looking at it from any of that perspective ever. It was just about being successful in the terms that applied to me and you know, how I defined success.
Now, to put this into perspective also, what year are we talking about right now that this happened, when you left school?
That was around 1992, yeah. So there's a lot, you know, there was still a lot happening musically. You know, grunge music was in full swing. There were live bands popping up everywhere. So like getting in a band and touring around was actually a really great thing. You know, you could, you could, if you were so inclined, you could do really well for yourself just by doing a band tour constantly.
Well, what were you really into at that time? Was there a particular style of music that like really spoke to you and you're like, hey, I think I'm going to try to go into this path?
I just love to play. But my favorite, the music that fascinates me the most, and probably always will, is that period of that period of jazz, from like small group jazz from like really 1960 to about 1964 or 65. So you had this really explosive growth of modal jazz that was happening. So you had you know, Miles Davis, of course, was long since established, but you had Miles, and then you had John Coltrane, and you know, everybody that Miles brought into his groups ended up having super groups of their own. The Wayne Shorters, the Herbie Hancocks, you know, all of that music really fascinates me to a great degree, and is really sort of, musically speaking, it's my first love, and I don't know where it comes from, but it's truly is.
Yeah. Well, let me ask, here's the line of delineation. Are you an Elvin man or a Tony man?
You know, there are things that I love about both of them. I don't love one more than the other. There's a certain, so for me, the way I describe it, and these are all, you know, sort of esoteric, subjective terms, but Tony Williams' playing always struck me as being very sharp and pointed, in that there was a precision there. Mm-hmm. So if he's on the right, well, you know, ding, 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 in the time is like, you know, right there, and he's doing his Tony thing. But there was a precision about it that it laid in the groove a certain way. And then Elvin was the exact opposite. It was really loose and open, and it had more of a, like this rolling kind of flow to it. And the time would be much more flexible this way. And that's just the way that I perceive it. And I love both of them equally, because they bring different things to the table, you know?
I think that's pretty accurate too.
So Chris, you know, we're kind of talking about some influences and love of music and all that. Speak a little bit to this. Like, where was your head when you were 16? Where was your head when you were 25? And where was your head when you're 40? As far as playing, as far as, you know. So
that's easy. When I was 16, everything was still, so all of my friends at 16, all of my friends were getting into thrash music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is no lie. So they're off trying to learn how to play drum beats that were being invented by Lars Ulrich and Charlie Benante and that breed of drummer and that style of music, and hair metal was still a big thing. So like everybody had these big monster drum kits with double kick drums, and it was just about stick twirling and the showmanship of it. Meanwhile, while that was all fun to do, I'm literally starting to discover big band jazz and getting into Mel Lewis and, discovering Art Blakey and discovering Papa Joe Jones and Philly Joe Jones, and that there was a difference between the two. At 16, that's where my head was at. At 25, I was desperately trying to escape the influence of Dave Weckl, and
get in line. Right.
That is not a slight against Dave at all. I've never met the man. I'm a fan of what he does. He is amazing. However, he had such a profound influence between, say, 87 and about 93, because Chick Corea was doing the acoustic band and the electric band, and Dave was doing all those solo records that were just insane. Just the stuff that was going on musically. And everybody, myself included, was trying to play like that. And at 25, I was trying to escape that and get more back in line with the Gadd and the Porcaro and the Keltner sort of approach to making music. Not that one is better than the other. It's just I was tired of playing a bunch of notes, if that makes any sense.
It sure does.
I was tired of trying to play a bunch of notes. And then at 40, I was rediscovering all the groovy things that are fun to me. So at 40, I was rediscovering my love for Ringo and rediscovering my love for funk music, James Brown. You know what I mean? Like, I love that stuff. And I know it seems really odd to mention Ringo and James Brown at the same time, but they were each innovative. James and his drummers were innovative in a certain way. Ringo was innovative in a certain way. And I think it's all connected. It's all there's this beautiful heritage where everybody's influencing everybody else,
Especially at that time,
Oh, yeah, man.
The art of groove drumming was being defined.
It really
in
was.
so many different ways and kind of coming
all
together.
the way around. I mean, if you look at what was happening in jazz in the late 60s, that's when you had the emergence of Jimmy Smith. And so you had all these guys just like playing these really super chill grooves that were deep. I mean, everything was just grooving. You had funk music that was developing. You had rock and roll music, the grooves that were developing in rock music. It wasn't just a plain old, 4 on the floor and 2 and 4 on the snare drum. It was, things were getting interesting. You had, and it was all meshing together. That's the other beautiful part. In the late 60s, early 70s, you could go see a concert and have a country band and a rock band and a funk band all on the same bill. And those guys were all hanging out and allowing it to mesh and come together. It's beautiful. We don't have that today.
That's
well,
true.
we kind of do. We don't.
Yeah. So, Chris, let's talk about now how you kind of organically went from school to being working Birmingham musician. Somewhere along the way, there was a path that got you to your current gig with Zac Brown. So let's talk about how that kind of led up to that.
Well, so as far as like becoming a working musician, like I got really crafty right out of school. I say right out of school. I wasn't finished. Of course, I was fired. And I had gone around to all of the guys. Every good house gig has to come to an end, and so in the interim of not having some band tour to do with somebody, I would go around to all of the drummers in Birmingham that I loved and respected. And I would tell them, hey, man, life is going to happen. You've got a wife, you got kids, you got, vacation, hospital visits. Something's going to happen, and you're going to need somebody to sub your gig. And when that happens, I want to be the guy who subs your gig. I don't want you gig. I want you to be able to keep your gig. I just want to be able to pick up the scraps. And And I did that enough to where guys started letting me, they would sub me out, you know. Fast forward, you know, a bunch of years, I had this really loose kind of opportunity to play with a group of guys in Decatur, Georgia. And it was a real loose kind of situation. It was one of those like, hey, man, you know, like, why don't you come do this gig? Our regular drummer can't do it. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And at the time I was touring with, you know, I was freelancing in Birmingham, but also on the road with Oteil Burbridge and in his solo effort called the Peacemakers. And I had decided that I was going to go and do this, like, I'll go and do this gig. And it never paid much money. It literally paid $40. And then a barbecue sandwich or a cheeseburger, whatever was on the menu, you know, that I felt like eating. And I didn't even figure out the food part until I was already a year into the gig, you know, show up and play the gig for $40. And it was at a blues, you know, just like, it was a blues jam session. It was on a Wednesday night. It was every Wednesday night. And I just met this group of musicians in Atlanta that I was unfamiliar with. And one in particular calls me up one night and he's like, hey, I got this buddy of mine that I used to work with. His name's Zach. He has a band. He needs a drummer. You think you'd be interested? And I said, oh man, yeah, of course I'd be interested. I would love to play with him. And I had actually heard Zach, the Zac Brown Band before, like not too terribly, like within a year, less than a year before, and was impressed at how just really slick it sounded. You know, just it sounded great, and I was like, wow, these guys might have something. And I really didn't go beyond that in my mind at the time. And then so our mutual friend Tim calls me up and says, hey, can I give him your name and number? I said, yeah, that'd be great. He said, great, I already did. And then a few days later, I get a call from Zach who says, hey, you know, our mutual friend Tim says that I should call you and that I could throw away everybody else's number. And I was like, well, I don't know about that, but well, here we are. And so he invited me to audition, and I did, and got the gig. I had literally about 24 hours to learn the music. Because the foundation, the first record, had already been recorded and had already been mastered and was artwork and everything. All of that had been done. And the guy whom the original drummer had left, Marcus Petruska, who did amazing work on that record. Marcus is an Atlanta guy. He had left. They had a different guy in there who just didn't want to go, you know, be on the road a bunch. And my disposition was as such that not only did I feel like going on the road, that, you know, I didn't really care about making money. I just wanted to make music, you know. So I didn't have to get paid a whole lot. I just wanted to get paid a little something. That was it. Literally, they invited me to join the band.
Did you have an idea at that time that this could be life-changing, or was it literally just one of these things where it's just like, I'm just going to ride this thing out, and yeah, we might have a couple of good years, and then I'll be right back and just start working in Birmingham again, or was it like, this could be it?
Well, so it really comes back to how I define success for myself, which has always been, you know, at the end of your tax forms, there's a box where you sign your name. And next to that box, to the right of that box, there's a box that says occupation. And you write in what you do for a living. So success for me, since I was about 17 years old, so that's, 30 years now. Success has been defined as simply writing the word musician in that box. That's it. Everything else, you know, as long as I'm paying my bills via being a musician, that's all that mattered to me. And so when I joined up with Zach and the guys, he literally, like, I asked him when he invited me to join the band, he's like, you're our guy. And I'm like, great. That's awesome. And he is, so I guess we need to have a talk. And I said, well, let me ask you just a few questions. Number one, can you keep me busy? And he laughs and goes, yeah, I can keep you really busy. I said, great. Question number two, can you pay me a little something so that I can, as long as I can get paid something, I can, pay my bills. And he says, yeah, I think we can work that out. And I was like, great. Third question, what time's the bus leave? And that's it. Now, I didn't know anything about record label negotiating and radio tour and single being pushed on the radio. I knew nothing about that. And it didn't matter to me. I just wanted to stay busy. I wanted to work. I wanted to work with musicians who were doing something that I had not done. Playing that style of music, I had not really jumped into a whole bunch. And I wanted to just take on the challenge full force, and that's it. I mean, that's really it.
John, you know what is absolutely awesome about his answer is that Chris has no idea that he has just dropped a major soundbite about my definition of success was writing musician on the tax form. That's one of the best answers, man, I've ever heard.
I love it.
It's fantastic, man.
But it's different for everybody. Everybody defines success on their own terms. So, like, I have a very dear friend. He booked me for a gig, and I show up to the gig, and you do festival work, and you have black drum cases, and everybody's got black drum cases. So what do? You spray paint your name or some identifying mark on your drum case. Well, I had stenciled my name onto my drum cases, and I walk into this gig, and my buddy goes, "Oh wow, you've really made it! Like you're really successful." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Man, like you have your name spray painted on your drum cases." And I said, well, what difference does that make? And he goes, well, that's a sign that you've really made it. And he was dead serious. Wow. And I was like, hey man, I tell you what, we'll spend $10. We'll go to the hardware store. We'll buy a stencil kit and a can of paint, and you two can have, you will have made it, because 10 minutes later we will have spray painted your name on your cases. And he was like, you did that yourself? He was just blown away. But in his mind, that was how success was defined. And I've met people along the way that, they think it's about, like, for them, success is defined as driving, fancy cars and having huge, mansions in Malibu, and that's cool. That's what success is for them. But for me, it's something totally different, man. It's about being able to make music and being able to make a living at music.
Well, I would think that you're doing that rather well right now, Chris. So
there's a lot of icing in my world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like everything beyond musician in the box is icing on the cake, and there's been a lot of icing in my world.
Well, let me tell you, for our listeners who have been living under a rock for the past 10 or 12 years, Chris is in one of the most successful bands in the world right now. And what I would want to do now is talk a little bit about what it's like today doing gigs with Zac Brown Band. So we'll do a little topic called A Day in the Gig Life of Chris Fryar. Okay. So just in a roundabout way, what is a typical gig day like for you? And let's just say you're playing in Chicago.
Well, the last few times we've played in Chicago, it's been at Wrigley Field, so it's been like a rather special set of circumstances. And those are so like when you play a baseball stadium or a football stadium, the biggest thing you got to do when you wake up in the morning is figure out, because the way we do it, we travel at night. We have drivers that will, we sleep on the bus. And you wake up, you have no idea where you're at. And thank goodness we have somebody who is smart enough to put signs and like day sheets. This is where you're at. This is what the schedule of events is. And so you find the day sheet, you find all the signs, you find out where the bathroom is, you find out where catering is, you find out where the dressing room is, and you find out where the stage is. And so I spend the first, I wake up, I'll call my wife, and then after that, I'm trying to spend the next 30 minutes to an hour finding all of those things. Like where am I supposed to be? What time am I supposed to be there? For the most part, you get up. Once I find the stage, I go in and like make sure everything is copacetic. With the drum kit, I have an amazing drum tech, a guy named Sean Preto, who he's worked with a bunch of people. He lives in the Atlanta area. He's amazing. He takes really good care of me, and so I try to touch base with him. Hey, do we need to send out for anything? Did anything break? Do I need to order anything? How is your world? Can I get you a coffee? I have a very I try to approach that relationship as we're there to help each other. It is really what it is. We're there to help each other. He's there to help me. He doesn't do it for me necessarily, even though that's what usually ends up happening is I'll get busy having to do a meet and greet, or if we're learning some new songs, we don't really take time to rehearse away from the road that often. So if we're going to learn something, we have a guest sitting in, we're going to learn something that day. That's pretty much it. I try to time my meals so that I'll eat breakfast late, I'll eat a very late lunch, and then not eat dinner, and then play the show, and then after the show I'll eat something small to kind of refuel a little bit. But for us, the show is about 2.5 hours long. So, and before the show, for at least an hour, I'm warming up, just going through a very systematic set of warm-ups to it's pretty easy day, really.
Well, you've
a lot
kind
of walking.
Yeah, you've kind of led into a couple of other questions I wanted to ask. One, let me ask you about sound check, because it's always been my experience on gigs, and almost anybody I've ever talked to as well, that sound check is basically another rehearsal for exactly the things you were talking about. Does sound check get fairly long sometimes, or is it traditionally just like, hey man, I can hear what I need to hear and we're done?
Well, to be perfectly honest, we travel with an extra set of gear, that a very, very stripped down small set of gear that we put in a room for rehearsal. There's so many working parts to our stage setup regarding video production and lighting and the PA, and there's so much going on that we really don't spend a lot of time doing a sound check. So I may go out, Clay Cook may go out, Matt Mangano may go out. We might be out there together, but for the most part, we don't do sound check. I'll sit down and I'll play on the drums to make sure things are where I need them to be in terms of, for whatever reason, my shoulder might be aching a little bit, and I pull the ride cymbal an inch closer. You know what I mean? Like stupid things like that, which inevitably end up moving it back when the gig when it comes time for the gig. But it's we don't really sound check. If we rehearse, and we do it in a room dedicated to rehearsing.
Quick side note, on sound check and in gigs, do you guys play with any sequences or click tracks?
So yeah, so we don't really use a whole bunch of tracks, but what we will do is we will play. There's some tunes that we made an artistic decision to have the video and lights synced with the music, and the easiest way to do that is to play to a click track. And so there's a SMPTE stripe on the track that cues all the lights and the video. And apart from that, it's literally just a quarter note just dinging in your head, like there's a love-hate relationship with the click track. And the reason I say that is, you may be collectively, we may all be feeling a little bit more excited than normal. And we get to this one tune and we're all just like, yeah, and we're leaning really forward on the beat. it feels like the click track is just dragging us down, and so it can become a bit of a nuisance if you let it. And I think the biggest thing for me is just like taking time to relax, take a deep breath, and then just like, it's not keeping the time, it's just the point of reference. And my job is to kind of skate in and out around that time, because everybody's feeling things different. We have 8 guys on stage total, and depending on what everybody's mood is, everybody may be pushing or dragging or sitting in the middle or whatever. It's just there's a lot of give and take, always. And my job, as I see it often, is to weave this golden thread to kind of keep everybody close to center, not necessarily center in the groove, but like, this is where we're at, like, this is us, right here. And it's a challenge, but yeah, clicks, they're fun if you let them be.
Yeah.
If you drag, if you don't like it, you can always not like it.
My experience is, playing with a band for a long time, I use clicks for a reference a lot, sometimes leave them on, but isn't it amazing how you can feel the just the vibe of the band from the first song you have a click? You can tell that night everybody's going to be pushing, everybody might be laid back, all that. And sometimes I view that as a real a good reference for where I'm going to feel things and all that. So like you said, you're not just going to be, dictating, but you can kind of get a pretty good idea of where things are rolling at that point.
Oh yeah. That's beautifully stated, by the way, that you for the rest of the gig, you're playing ahead or behind. I have a, what's that thing called? The Tama Rhythm Watch. I have one of those off on the side, and I have it plugged into the rig, to the monitor rig, but I'm the only one that hears it because nobody else is really aware that it's on. And so there's some tunes that I'll start out, and there's always a little bit of, because you've got 8 people on stage and because you've got 8 different personalities that are all thinking that the groove should be here or here, depending on your emotions for the day. I started using that as a tool. So I'll turn it on. It's a good point of reference. I can dial it in. However, there's subdivisions. And there's some nights that like I'll turn it on and I'll play a whole tune all the way through. And I'm the only one hearing the click track and it's dead on. But there are other nights that I'll start it, and as soon as the rest of the band starts playing, like it's painfully apparent that it's not there. And I have a foot switch that I can use to turn it off. So I'll just stomp the foot switch, turn it off, and just,
Play.
Yeah. But you have to be willing to take that journey with the guys, and I think that's the trap that some people fall into with the click track, is that, it does not have to be, if you're using just a click. Now, if you're using tracks, and there's extra things going on, and you're using a Pro Tools rig or an Ableton rig to help boost the sonic, like you're trying to, if you're using tracks, then you're pretty locked in. You have to surrender to the click. And even that, you can willfully do it or you can fight it.
Yeah, man. My experience is when I started using clicks regularly and realizing that a band, no matter how good it is, no matter, how long you play together, all that, it's this living, breathing organism that any given night could be interpreted differently than the night before. And we're talking about such minute things, but when we are sitting here trying to be all that is the foundation of a groove, like you said, you can't just be a dictator all the time too. You got to give and take, but it is fascinating how you guys play together all the time and how that tempo is interpreted night to night is just incredible, man.
Verse to chorus.
Yeah, that's true. That's great. Yeah.
It is what it is. And you have to be willing to take that journey. You have to, timekeeping is not just the drummer's job.
True.
Timekeeping is everybody's job. J.D. Blair sort of put it out there that a drummer's job is to be the groove regulator.
Mm-hmm.
He used to put that on his bass drum when he was playing with Shania Twain, the groove regulator. And it's a beautiful way of putting it. You know, that's our job. Our job is to, or at least as I see it, the job of a drummer is to take the groove that the bass player's putting down and take the groove that the guitar player's putting down and take the groove that the acoustic guitar player / singer's putting down and find a way to marry it all up. And for me, I sort of visualize that as being a musical tailor with a golden thread and a needle, and you gotta like stitch it all up and hold it together. And that's the way I look at it. It's kind of esoteric and stupid, but it works for me.
Chris, you mentioned also that prior to the gig, you have a fairly well regimented warm up that you do. Tell us what you do.
So I have this exercise that I saw in, I forget what magazine it was, but it was, I'm trying to remember the guy's name, Brian Mason. He's a drum corps teacher. And I saw this exercise in the back of a magazine, and it was like a grid. It's triplet based. It's got all these diddles and rolls. And I thought, well, you know, I fell in love with the thing, and I learned how to manipulate it in other ways as well. But I'll start out the day. First thing I play is this triplet grid exercise. And it's sort of my baseline. I know exactly how the rest of my warm-up is going to go, and just from this one exercise. And I know exactly where I might need to spend an extra few minutes here and there along the way. And so I'll do that. And then I run the advanced warm-up from Tommy Igoe's Great Hands for a Lifetime. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it runs, I don't know, 28, 29 rudiments in one continuous exercise. And it's, you know, takes about 10 minutes to run from the start to the end. You don't have to play it at the maniacal 185 that he sort of sets out. It's daunting to be able to play it at that speed. But as a warm-up, if you slow it down a good bit, you know, say around 165, 170, there's a lot of, you know, you can ease into your day. And during that, that's where I take the time to sort of incorporate some molar stroke technique. So I'll do big arms where I'm just like pulling the strokes up this way in a really slow and deliberate fashion. And as the exercise progresses, that, you know, it becomes less necessary. But I incorporate it because you have to use the shoulder and the elbow and the wrist and the fingers. You know, it's one big machine, and we're idiots if we don't take the time to warm it all up. At least that's my opinion. And so after that, I'll do this. I'm a big fan of drum corps exercises. A really big fan of drum corps exercises. So I have this laundry list, I call it, of these really amazing grids that I will go through and I'll manipulate. And, you know, all in all, it takes about, you know, maybe 30 minutes, but I'll really take my time and you know, spend at least 45 to get really good and warmed up. And the other part of it is, if you're good and warmed up, you're good and loose, and you know, everything physiologically is gonna be working just fine. And then you sit down behind the drum kit, you feel more at ease. But the other part of it is I'll have experimented for the last like 5 or 10 minutes of the warm up, all these extra notes and like extra subdivisions and doing all kinds of just crazy nonsense to an extent. And then I'm less likely to overplay on the gig. So when downbeat arrives, I'm not thinking about, you know, the 47 Vinnie Colaiuta licks that I just tried to figure out 2 days ago. I'm thinking about, hey man, like let's play what's musically appropriate for the song in this moment, you know. And so that's, you know, that's it. That's basically it. I know it was long-winded, but it's a long warm-up.
So a nice easy tune at 96 BPM isn't going to be your warm up.
No, man. You know,
see, I'll have to try your approach then.
yeah, I mean, there's some guys who do that, man. They walk out on stage and the first song is the warm up, and I'm like, oh man,
No, that's not good. You're in a little different place than most of my gigs. So,
well, I mean, even when I do, because I still freelance when I'm home, I still play gigs on the side, and I try to make sure that I warm up, even for, it may be a small jazz club, but it's still just as important as playing Fenway Park to me. I want to give my best every time. So you can injure yourself playing a combo gig if you're not careful.
Yep.
So I take time to warm up no matter what.
Chris, we're at a
Hold
point.
on.
What?
Duly noted. I probably won't change my nasty habits, but I'm listening, brother.
So, Chris, we're at a point in the show that we have to talk about gear because our listener base will shoot us dead if we don't talk about it. Drummers love to talk about gear. So let's talk about the gear that you play of course in the Zac Brown Band, but of course just in regular life and combo gigs, as you say, in Birmingham and around as well. So I know you have a Gretsch deal. Tell us about what you're playing.
So I use I use a USA custom kit, and the one I'm using out on the road for the past couple of years, it's actually a custom finish that Paul Cooper at Gretsch was kind enough to create for me, and it's beautiful. You can see the grain through it. The easiest way to describe it is a whitewash, high gloss finish, but one that looks like it's been sitting in a smoky jazz club for 30 years. So it's kind of got this weird yellowish tint to it that it's indescribable, and it's a beautiful, beautiful kit. But the sizes I use are right now, the one on the road is a 22-inch kick drum, so it's 16 deep, 22 in diameter. Tom sizes are 10 by 7, 12 by 8, 14 by 14, 16 by 16. I use a 5.5 by 14 copper snare drum. And then I've got a matching maple snare drum. It's a little side snare. It's a 10 by 6. And the thing's a little firecracker. Love it. And then cymbal-wise, I use Zildjian cymbals. I use a really large cymbal setup with Zac Brown Band because, through the course of a 2.5-hour show, I really need all the colors available to me that would present. So, like, starting from my left behind the drum kit, you can envision it. There's a 20-inch Oriental China trash, and then a 16-inch A custom crash, and then an 18-inch K thin dark crash. The hi-hats are the 14-inch K custom hybrids. And then my ride cymbal that I use is a K custom medium dark ride. And then I've got an 18-inch Constantinople crash, and then a 20-inch A custom EFX crash, the one with the big holes in it. And then on the very end, I've got a 20-inch A custom China. And then I've got two splash cymbals right in the middle, which are a 6-inch A custom and a 10-inch K. And so I've got a lot of different colors available to me in that palette, and it's a lot of fun. It's a big setup. It's not as big as, like, say, Neil Peart or some of those guys, but it's a big setup. When I'm doing combo gigs, and I like to keep it simple, so like if I'm doing a combo gig, I'll use either an 18 or a 20-inch kick drum, and then sometimes it's like snare, rack, floor. Sometimes I'll use 2 floors, but it's always 14-inch hi-hats, I will go the more traditional kind of approach in that every symbol is a crash symbol and every symbol is a ride symbol. I'll take that kind of mentality, and I'll use 3 thin ride symbols. So I'll use, like, say, I've got this really old K that I bought it in 1989 out of a pawn shop. The guy didn't know what it was. I bought it for $80, and it's a 20-inch jazz ride. It's really thin and dark and trashy, and the bell's beautiful, and it's still around, thank goodness. But I have that, and then I use just whatever else I get my hands on. I have a pretty large symbol collection. I'm a symbolholic. I should go to meetings.
We all should, man. Chris, what kind of drum heads are you using?
Evans. I use depending on the circumstances, I will use coated or clear. I prefer single ply. It's a feel thing for me. Out on the road right now with Zac Brown, it's all single plies, G1 coated all the way around. Real simple. You could just about get them anywhere. So, but the kick drums, I use the what is it? I think it's the EMAD 4 or the EMAD 2. I don't know what it is, man. It's like, I know it's got the foam ring on the outside that I can manipulate and take on and off if I want to. It's a double ply. I try to avoid like a really wide open bass drum sound on the road. So like if I'm at home, I'll go like felt strip, nothing inside, because it's a much quieter circumstances. When you get on big stages in amphitheaters and arenas and in stadiums and things, stage volume ends up always being insane. You're always next to a guitar amp that's really loud or a bass amp that's really loud. So I tend to use a pillow in the bass drum, but I use one of those really, I buy what works best for my circumstances. So like what I'm using on the inside is a DW bass drum pillow. The thing's amazing. It's just the right amount of stuffing. I don't like to, go too crazy with it though.
Yeah. What about sticks?
Vic Firth 5B wood tip. Really simple. I found out a handful of years back that is indeed their most popular stick worldwide. The 5B wood tip.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I was talking to a guy at Regal Tip the other day, and all those stick companies, they all know each other and they all that good stuff. And they were telling me that about 3/4 of the drumming population play sticks between 5A and 5B. So,
oh yeah, it's what works on those bigger gigs. It's when you're playing at a higher volume, you don't realize it, but you're playing when you got a big crowd and that energy's there. You're playing a little harder, and you need that extra little bit of meat and potatoes in the recipe, and that 5B really does the trick. I don't go through them hardly at all. It's rare that I break a stick.
Yeah. So, Chris, we're about to power down here, man. Everything's gone great, man. You've been a tremendous guest, and you've really cued us in on what you've been up to and what you're doing. But one thing we want to talk about also is you're going to be a guest of ours over here in Atlanta here in a week or so. And,
oh yeah,
yeah. Let's just talk just briefly about this Steve Gadd tribute that's coming up on the 9th.
Wow. So yeah, at the Vista Room, I am so excited and terrified, and I feel so honored and blessed to be a part of it. Steve Gadd is a huge influence. He's arguably one of the most influential drummers alive today. He's really like given us. He opened up the door and said, "This is what's possible," and then just turned us loose. He's so inventive and plays with such beautiful passion. And and precision at that. I mean, it's gad. I mean,
Have you been shedding your gadadiddles?
oh my gosh, yeah, man, that whole like the flutter lick. Oh my gosh, that's my favorite gadism is the where you invert the double strokes.
Yeah.
So like, you know, right, left, right, left, right, you know, and then you sneak in a foot in there, you know, and he does it better than anybody. He invented the thing, I think, and that and his like the whole. Some people call him hertas.
Yeah.
You know, you know, he's got that thing that he does that only he can do it. He calls it like a ratamadiddle or something. I don't know what but it's like a ratamacue that's all just one-handed, you know, and it's the way he voices it and it's the way he plays it that makes it so gad. You know, it's the only way to describe it. He's the only one that plays it that way. He's the only one that's ever played it that way. And you hear it one time and go, oh, that's Steve Gadd.
Well, man, let me tell you, you got a surprise coming for you when you come over here. You're going to have a great time, man. The vibe in the room is like nothing else. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. This is the most I've shedded for anything in a long while. I mean, and I mean, you can't really see it, but I got charts over here on the. Here, let me.
Oh, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, those are the charts that I've been shedding, man. That's like, I'm gonna be blessed to be playing on Asia and Spain, and then a tune called "So White, So Funky." It's a Tom Scott tune, and that was really my very first, like, knowing that I was listening to Steve Gadd. That was my first tune that I heard. The very first one. It was off a record called Apple Juice that was recorded years ago by Tom Scott. And it's basically Stuff, Steve's solo band.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the guy, Richard T. and Eric Gale and Ralph McDonald. And he had all these guys who got together and played all this beautiful music. And Tom Scott just hired them and did some records with them. And beautiful sounding stuff. And that one record just opened up my world. I think I may have been 15 or 16 when I first heard it. And it was really cool. It opened me up in a huge way.
Well, man, we're really looking forward to it, man. It's going to be a heck of a night.
It's going to be it's going to be the most fun I can have without getting arrested.
Well, the getting arrested comes after the show. We'll go do that afterwards. Exactly. So, Chris, we have a little tradition here when we're getting ready to finish up this show. And it's something that we've put a lot of great drummers through, man. We've done this to Joel Rosenblatt and Tom Breckline and whole bunch of these guys. And we like to call it the Drummers Weekly Groovecast Rorschach Test. And essentially what it is, man, it's just a series of little short questions that have short answers. And like a perfect example of this is I would say, Chris, how do you like your chicken, baked or fried? And you would say...
Fried.
Duh.
How do you like your cold beer, on a Tuesday or Friday night?
Yes.
Saturday afternoon.
You failed the Zac Brown portion of this gig, man. How did you do that? Okay, so here we go. We're going to start with the first question. Don't overthink it, man. Short answers, okay?
Short answers.
All right, here we go. Zildjians, A's or K's?
K's.
Gretsch, USA Custom or Broadcaster?
USA Custom.
What is your favorite large venue to play?
Fenway Park.
Barbecue, pork, beef, or chicken?
Pork.
Good answer, Southern man. In-ear monitors or wedges?
In-ears.
Double paradiddle or paradiddle-diddle?
Paradiddle-diddle. It's the basis of the entire jazz vocabulary.
Curly or shimp?
Woo! Curly.
Clear or coded?
Coded.
PC or Mac?
PC. Well, no. I'm terrible at this. Mac, because that's what I used to record with.
Got it. When you're on the road, do you prefer bus or plane?
Bus.
Sports, love them or hate them?
Love them.
Knew that. Okay, here's your follow-up question. Michael Jordan, Chicago Bull or Birmingham Baron?
I mean, he was a terrible baseball player. Birmingham Bulls.
All right, good enough. What's your favorite method book?
Gary Chafee, Volume 3 of the Patterns series. Time Functioning.
Nice. Ringo or Charlie Watts?
Ringo.
Beach or mountains?
That's Sir Richard Starkey now, by the way.
Yes, it is. Beach or mountains?
What's that?
Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
Snare drum, wood or metal?
Ooh, metal.
Tuning, you do it by ear or do you use a tuning device?
I do it by feel.
Nice. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
If you could take a lesson from anyone, and we've got to leave Ed Soph out of this. If you could take a lesson from anyone, who would it be?
Vinny Colaiuta.
What's your favorite TV show?
Ghost Adventures.
All right, and this is going to be a letdown, but because we've already hinted at this, Crimson Tide or War Eagle?
Oh, Crimson Tide all the way, baby.
All right, buddy, you passed the test.
I was worried for you, man. You did all right.
Oh, man. Woo! Are you guys Georgia Bulldog fans?
Tennessee, man. That's where I got my undergraduate degree.
Oh, wow. Hey, man, you guys, this is my prediction. And I know this is probably boring to people who are not into sports.
We love every minute of this.
And you are into college football.
Yeah.
The team to watch for the next 2 to 5 years is Tennessee, because they've got Jeremy Pruitt, who is an unbelievable coach. He's been passed on far too many times for being a head coach. But he's got a shot. He's walking into a situation where he's got a ton of 4- and 5-star talent, and all he's got to do is just wrangle them together and get them to play like a team. My prediction is Tennessee wins the East this year. Tennessee may very well win the East next year, and possibly even the third year after that. After that, it gets a little squirrely because you got Kirby Smart getting in his recruiting system in at Georgia, and it becomes a real challenge to get past both of those teams.
Dude, you are speaking my language. I know what we're talking about in the green room next week. It ain't going to be drums.
Man, I tell you what, it's Tennessee's the most dangerous team right now in the SEC, apart from Alabama. Alabama's just got – I don't say this because I'm a fan. I say it because it's a fact. They are just way too loaded right now. They have way too many way too many weapons in the arsenal, way too big of an arsenal. Nick Saban's going to beat you. If you're not careful, you have to be not just 100% on your game, you have to be 200% on your game and be flawless. And if you can't do that, then you're going to have a tough day against Nick Saban. Well, it's as simple as that.
I think it's completely and totally evident that how many teams, and I'm talking about even professional football teams, could pull a quarterback in a championship game at halftime who's not injured, and then the guy, second string, comes back and wins the national championship for you. It just doesn't happen, man. It's a machine.
Oh, man.
We just lost like 300 listeners, Phil. Thanks a lot.
I think what we witnessed was two things. We witnessed the emergence of a potential legend. Tua is just an amazing athlete. He's such a joy to watch. And the other thing that we witnessed was more important. We probably witnessed the greatest coaching performance in the history of college football. That was, up to this point, that was probably the most amazing performance as a coach, as a head coach.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. And like I said, I know what we're talking about next Monday. So
yeah, clearly in the back of the green room, I'm going to have Dreamland ribs and a closed door, and you guys can just go do your thing, man.
Dreamland ribs, man. Those things are so good. I wish they were a person. so I could run away to Vegas and do debaucherous acts.
Knoxville and Birmingham cordon off the green room next week. It's going to be great, man.
Yeah.
Chris, we're about to finish up, man. Thank you very much. Do you have anything else that you would like to talk about, to promote, or anything, like your website?
You know, I'm so, like, I don't have anything else going on right now. I'm constantly trying to write new music for myself. Being such a huge jazz fan, it's my aspiration to one day have a jazz record, if you can call it that these days, of original music that I've written. But, you know, that's down the road a bit. So, no, come to the GAD thing. If you come to the Steve Gadd tribute at the Vista Room in Atlanta, April 9th. Everyone's going to be there. And if you're not there, you're going to miss out. And you're going to read about it the next day, and you're going to be all upset with yourself. You should definitely come out. And you'll get to see me do something other than Zac Brown Band music.
Yeah, man.
That might be a treat.
That's exciting.
Awesome.
Like I said, I'm terrified. I'm literally shaking in my boots because it's those are two really incredible songs, and I'm blessed to be a part of it.
You're following a real hack though, so you'll sound really good.
Oh yeah, who am I following? Little John?
You are.
Oh my gosh, that dude! I love his playing.
He's not bad, is he?
That dude. I remember hearing Little John. It's been a long while back. I think he was in Boston playing around in that area. And a guy I know from here in Birmingham was up at Berkeley going to school up there. And it was just, Little John was amazing then. It was.
They had that Wednesday night jam that he's, and then Adam took over that chair after John left, Adam Deitch. We talked about that. He was like,
Deitch is another. Oh my gosh, what another amazing player!
Yeah, there's some history there between those two. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, man, thank you again very much for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure, buddy.
I feel very blessed and honored. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, say goodbye to the good folks out there in Groovecast Nation.
Goodbye. Peace and love.
We really hope you enjoyed that interview with Chris. As you can tell, he's just such a nice guy and just a wonderful player. He's super humble and friendly, and I know that if you ever see this guy out and about, if you ever see him playing with the Zac Brown Band, if you go up and say hi to him, he will just be a super great guy and really enjoy talking with him. As a matter of fact, we are listening to a track with Chris playing on it from the Zac Brown Band. It's called Who Knows. It's a track that he and I talked briefly about after the show was finished, and he thought that might be a good representation of his playing. So I'm going to fade that up when we get finished with that so you can check him out a little bit closer. Also, just make sure you find him and follow him when he is touring with the Zac Brown Band. They're always going to come to a city near you. And also, if you are in the Atlanta area, make sure you come by the Vista Room on Monday, April the 9th, where you can see Chris, along with his bandmate Daniel De Los Reyes, a little guy named Little John Roberts, and a cast of Atlanta's finest musical craftsmen as they pay tribute to Dr. Steve Gadd. It's going to be a great night, and like we talked about in the show, the vibe in that room is going to be absolutely unbeatable. So make sure you come by. And if that's not enough to get you to come by, don't forget that John and I will be there early, and we're going to stay late. We'll be roaming around that room all night long, so please come by and say hi to us if you get a chance. As always, thanks for listening to the show. We really, really appreciate it. We don't ask this very often, but when you get a chance, if you are an iTunes listener, please swing by our homepage inside of iTunes and leave us a short written review. It really, really helps us a lot. We don't ever ask you for money. This is about the most we will ever burden you with. So if you will just get a quick moment, please run by our homepage inside of iTunes and leave us that short written review. We'd greatly appreciate it. Also, while you're there, if you would like, you can subscribe to us. You can subscribe to us there at iTunes, Google Play Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, pretty much anywhere that you can find and listen to podcasts, you can find us. If you can't find us, go over to our website, drummersweeklygroovecast.com. You can definitely find us there along with everything else that is the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. You've got our videos. You've got a little bit about us. You got our email form. Let us know if you can't find us. We will point you in the right direction. We have brand new shows that we publish every single Monday, and then every first and third Thursday of the month, we have mini episode accountability Thursdays. If you're not familiar with those, what we do is on those short mini episodes, we take a rudimental solo from either the NARD book or the Wilcoxon book. We analyze it, we practice it, and then when we finish with that show, we encourage everyone to record their own version of it and post it on the social media platform of their choice. Tag the show in it, and we will give you the proverbial bucket o' pride. All right, folks, that's going to do it. We appreciate you, as always, listening to the show. On behalf of Chris and John, this is Phil, and we'll see you next week.
Oh, that light shall, and one day it's gonna shine. Sing until the darkness it is lifted. Sing until the darkness it is lifted.